Our clients ask that we tell you, first of all, they're very appreciative of your presence here today. They think this story and this issue is extremely important, not only to Chinese students and the Chinese community, but also to the greater community of Southern California at large. It's also an important issue, especially to students who are in a vulnerable position. So the purpose of this lawsuit in particular is to focus on the outrageous conduct of this doctor who's cloaked with the authority and the confidence of USC. So what we are doing here, this is a civil lawsuit, it's not a criminal lawsuit, is to compensate these women for what they were exposed to. They're in an extremely vulnerable position. It's an extremely intimate position. And this conduct fits a typical pattern that you would see in a sexual predator. And as we go through here today, we'll describe that in a little more detail. So I'd also like to thank Todd Becker, who invited me to participate in this lawsuit because my firm's handled these types of sexual predator cases before. Todd has a specialized practice where he represents hundreds and hundreds of Chinese Americans and Chinese nationals. He's extremely adept and knowledgeable with the customs of China as well as he's lectured in China. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Todd and ask if you have any comments.
Thank you, Pat. We at the Becker Law Group have represented Chinese nationals and Chinese Americans for over 30 years. And I've lectured at many universities in China. And I think this case has some very unique issues. Number one, USC has more Chinese students than any other school in the United States. And they're making more money than any other school in the United States from Chinese students. And you know, one of the key things that they promise these Chinese students is they're going to be in a protected environment. And you know, we've learned through this lawsuit and through the facts and circumstances of it that that's simply not the case. Further, if you look at the Chinese culture and society by comparison to the American society, there's very few civil cases in China. Their legal system is fairly new by comparison to the American legal system. And because of that, that factor, and coupled with the fact that Chinese families tend to be very private and don't want to publicize these type of things, and they're not familiar with American culture, which allow this to happen to them more prevalently than some of their Western schoolmates. For instance, when the Chinese women went to see Dr. Tyndall, it was probably, for the most part, the first time they'd ever seen a doctor in the United States. Secondly, a lot of them had never been to a male gynecologist ever in China or the United States. And so a lot of the things that seemed inappropriate and made them feel uneasy, they just chalked up to, okay, I don't know the culture very well, this must be normal, he's got the backing of USC, they've told me that I'm going to be safe here. And so therefore, they tried to push it under the rug and try to minimize what was going on and trying to assure themselves that what was happening was legitimate and not abnormal. That coupled with kind of the Chinese cultural perspective of not wanting to bring any shame to their family, so they all just kept very quiet about this. And even at this point, although it's been seen through investigation that there seemed to be a targeting of Asian and particularly Chinese students, there's been very few Chinese students that have come forward by comparison to their non-Chinese classmates at USC. So these factors make this case very important to us, and to me in particular, because I've represented the Chinese community in America and also in China for many, many years, and we believe that this is a very important case. Thank you.
So another significant issue that many people have asked us about is how is this type of crime perpetrated? How does somebody actually go about effectuating this type of conduct? And And the conduct that this doctor engaged in fits a typical pattern for a sexual predator. And make no mistake about it, this type of conduct is predatory and it is sexual. Keep in mind that these are women who are in a very vulnerable, intimate situation. This particular type of examination occurs in a room. It occurs generally when you're at least half disrobed. It occurs, with a lot of intimacy between the doctor, in this case, and the patients. From time to time, there would be, in this instance, a third person in the room, but a lot of the time there wasn't. And these people operate by moving incrementally. They set the scene up. They start by doing things that are appropriate. And as they move forward, they move closer and closer to a line which would be inappropriate until they finally have crossed the line. Trap has been set and the patient is caught in it. In this particular instance, and it rings true with the other complaints that we've reviewed, the predatory conduct included suggestive comments. It included questioning these particular students about their past histories, including past sexual history, and also included inappropriate touching. So this is typical, and as a result of this, there's devastating consequences to these women. It undermines their sense of security, their sense of confidence. They feel humiliated. A lot of times women feel, and in this instance, as though it's their fault, when in fact it is not. So as a result of that, they brought this case, and they also wanted every person to know two things. Number one, that they hope that by bringing this case and through a thorough investigation and the airing of the facts, that they can prevent this from happening in the future, number one. And number two, if anybody has any information they think would be helpful, please contact us, let us know, because it will be significant in prosecuting this case. Thank you.